Ahoy, mateys! This is A7X Fan Ben. This is Pirate CSG podcast number 43, and I want to thank Jason Mical for being the latest guest on the podcast.
Avast ye!
Awesome. So we're going to talk about some of Jason's involvement with Wizkids. He was the communications manager at Wizkids from 2003 to 2006. So I'll let you talk about your involvement with Wizkids, how it all started, and whatever else you want to mention with your origin story in terms of pirates.
Sure. So my origin story actually is a superhero origin story. I got my start playing HeroClix shortly after it came out, and I was a judge at my local comic book store in Oklahoma and was fairly active in the WizKids community at the time online and on HC Realms. And at one point there was a job posting for like basically what we would call now a community manager, I guess. And so I was like, hey, I meet the criteria for that. And so I sent in my resume, and I was flown out for an interview, and I got the job, and that's what I did. And after I was there for about 6 months, they moved me over purely under the marketing team to sort of a communications manager role, which sort of encompassed all of like public relations. There was a lot of like ad writing and everything else that went on, but I always kind of stayed on the forums and sort of did that community management stuff as well. So I'm sure anyone who's out there who remembers the HeroClix forums probably remembers the name Brother Magneto. So that was me, and it was fantastic. And Pirates was something that kind of got kicked off. I was kind of toward the end of my run at WizKids, and I've always been a fan of Pirates, like from the time I was a little kid and watched like Errol Flynn movies and stuff. I loved watching those. I even enjoyed watching Cutthroat Island in high school, which probably dates me a little bit, but it was the only pirate movie we had at the time. And so I was super excited about Pirates, and they knew, the game designers at WizKids knew that I really liked to write stories, fiction. And so I was invited to start writing some of the card fiction for the Pirates CSG. And I started that, did this research because I couldn't exactly remember. I think Barbary Coast was my first set. Yes, that's right. Barbary Coast was the first set I actually got to write for. And I had the opportunity to both name the ships and write the fiction for the ships. So that's what I did. And I did it on several sets after that, all the way up to, I think Rise of the Fiends was the last set I worked on.
Yep. Nice. So you actually designed some of the ships too, with the stats and whatnot, or just the names?
No, so I didn't design any of the ships. Mike Mulvihill was the lead designer on the game, and he did all the statting out of the ships. And what would typically happen is I would get a spreadsheet of all the ship stats and their special abilities, and then I was told I could kind of go just hog wild and do whatever whatever would work to kind of fiction that would sort of fit what the ability was and fit the faction and sort of fit the story arcs. And there were a few story arcs that sort of wove throughout the Pirates game, and there were a few characters that Mike or someone else did the favorite text for, because they were sort of the marquee characters of the series. But anything else was fair game. And I think I even threw a few story arcs of my own in there too, to kind of like secondary arcs if anyone was paying attention. So little Easter eggs, I think, if you were watching between sets. So.
Yeah, I loved how they had different versions of the same crew and things like that, and it was interesting to see that some of the characters evolve over time. I think the flavor text is one of the more underrated parts of the game. The game is great, but the flavor text can really make it more thematic, which is awesome because it's kind of a quasi-historical game at times, so it does make it pretty neat.
Yeah, and I was reading through, refreshing my memory, because some of the stuff 12 years old at this point, or older.
Yeah.
Like there were actually, like, we put straight up historical things in there,
Yep.
several, and things from literature and ships from literature and characters from literature, as well as just sort of fantasy stuff that we made up.
Yep. Nice. So you would say that the most of the flavor text came from like ship abilities and stats rather than the other way around in general?
That's right. The ship's abilities and stats were always done first,
Yep.
and the flavor text was written. We tried to match. I tried to match as best we could. Sometimes what I wrote didn't make it through, and that's that anyone who's done any anyone who's done any freelance writing knows how that feels. You put something in there you really like, and then it gets cut at the last minute or something else. So there are a few things that were supposed to be in there that just never made it all the way through. But for the most part, they did, and yeah, the abilities sort of came first. And when I could, I wrote to them, but if not, I just kind of threw some cool stuff in there and called it good.
Yep. Nice. So the first main question, since you worked at Wizkids before the Spanish main set was released, did you have insight on Jordan Wiseman's thought process around the game?
Yeah. So we were looking, we being Wizkids, I guess, but specifically, Jordan and the executives were looking for ways to kind of branch out beyond just doing collectible miniatures. And they were the sort of cut styrene cards. We knew there was some big potential there. And we had several ideas that we kind of were floating around with what we could do with that. And the Pirates game, I think, was something that was so played so well and so elegantly that, and there was sort of a Pirates, I guess, like mini mania, what with the Pirates of the Caribbean movies and stuff,
Yep.
At the time. It was definitely part of the zeitgeist, I think. And so, it was one of those things where we kind of just were able to time it really well. And, it was really looking to get into kind of the styrene cards, as well as how can we branch out beyond just the collectible miniatures uh, games that we had done to that point. And so, James and Mike, uh, James Ernest and Mike Selinker came in and sort of showed us this game, and we're like, yeah, this I think could really work. So, granted, I was not necessarily in those meetings, so some of this is secondhand, but that is definitely how I remember it going down. And I mean, I remember we were play testing early versions of this, just done with cardboard cutouts. Maybe even a year before it came out. It was pretty shortly after I got to WizKids. So it was in the works for quite a while.
Yep. Very nice. I took part of the interview you did a while back, and you mentioned Pirates a few times in it. One of the things you said was Pirates was a success in every definition of the term. The game was an experiment designed to attract a certain Disney license, and we didn't know it would sell nearly as well as it did. So based on that,
Yeah.
did Jordan Wiseman create the game solely to get a Pirates of the Caribbean license to WizKids?
Well, I I think the answer is kind of yes and no. That was definitely on his mind, but like I said, kind of expanding beyond just the collectible miniatures game market was something we were really trying to do as a company as well. And we wanted something small that could, not only be in like hobby game stores, but could go into mass market too. And the kind of breaking that barrier from the hobby store into the mass market was always one of the sort of secondary objectives of a lot of the things we did
Yep.
at one of the things we did at WizKids, right? And to certain degrees of success, I feel like. But Pirates was a huge success. I remember the year it came out, just doing demo after demo after demo at conventions, and it was everybody who played it bought it. It was amazing.
Yep.
So yeah, it was great.
Yeah, that's really awesome. What other WizKids employees did you work with?
Mike Mulvihill very closely. I mean, do you specifically want people who worked on Pirates,
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
or
Yeah. Go, Mike.
the whole bunch?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's
No,
fine.
it's yeah. Mike Mulvihill very closely. Seth Johnson, who designed and wrote some of the cards and flavor text for. He did Mysterious Island, or Mysterious Islands, which is the one sort of expansion I didn't get a chance to do. It came out after I left the company, and I think Seth kind of came in and was like, "Yep, that's something I'd like to do," because he's very heavily into like the sort of Jules Verne steampunk sort of, or at least he was at the time, very heavily into the Jules Verne steampunk influence. And I mean, I would work with Jordan from time to time. Usually in a more marketing capacity, but every now and then, yeah, we would just he had a habit of calling people into his office and being like, "Hey, what do you think about this?" And kind of just polling us for opinions about things, which was a pretty fun
Yeah.
part of working at.
Nice. Did you consult with any of the game designers for flavor text ideas like Mike Selinker or James Ernest?
So I actually don't recall if James Ernest and Mike Selinker worked very heavily on the game after they kind of did the initial design, because they had their own company that they were working for, and I think they contracted. I'm not 100% sure
Yeah.
about this.
No, that's right.
I
They did. They talked
Yeah.
about that on the podcast. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks. Good. I'm glad I'm not making this up. They had contracted with Jordan to make the game, but I don't think they were very heavily involved afterwards. I mean, I know Mike personally. I just first of all as a professional contact, then we sort of became just, I guess, buddies, I guess, online. I haven't spoken to James Ernest in years though,
Mhm.
so and they didn't really do a lot. Like I said, with the game after I think the initial design, I certainly remember Mike coming up to us at Comic-Con and playing the game and having a great time.
Yep.
That was a good time.
Yeah. Nice. How did the naming of the Constructible strategy game term come about, and how did it go over with WizKids?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I had kind of forgotten I'd named that because until you reminded me, which is really funny, and I'll tell you why in a minute. So the we were just looking for a term to name this new genre of game, because we knew we wanted to do more than just pirates. And I'm reasonably certain that the Lord of the Rings game was announced at one point, which ended up unfortunately getting canceled. If not, hey, there was going to be a Lord of the Rings game too.
Wow.
Um, so I'm pretty sure that was announced, but they needed a new name for this genre of game, and we kind of just did the whole brainstorming thing. We sat down in a conference room and wrote a bunch of stuff on the board, and at one point I looked at sort of the construct of C blank G, for collectible miniatures game, which was what we were known for originally. And from that I took the C and was like, well, it's constructible, so we can go with that. And it's not a miniature, it's not a miniatures game per se, but it's more strategy. And so I just shouted it out, and like we circled it and everybody loved it.
Yeah.
So
Nice.
yeah, it was. And the reason it's funny that I'd forgotten about that is my current job is I'm the senior brand copywriter at Xbox.
Uh-huh.
One of my responsibilities is naming new products.
Nice.
So yeah, so I was like, oh yeah, that's right. I was doing naming like a decade ago. That's awesome. Anyway,
Yeah, that is really cool. I always loved it, how unique the game was and everything like that. Very nice.
thanks.
Yep. The game started with historical fleets, and toward the end of the game, it shifted in more of a fantasy direction. Was that a change in direction to gain a bigger audience, or do you think it was a way for the team to express their ideas? Or maybe both?
I think it was both.
Yep.
We There was a lot of especially at the beginning, there was a lot of, I think, more historical sort of wargaming and like in the general DNA of the game, right?
Yep.
And there, I'm trying to think of how best to. Okay, so at the same time that Pirates of the Caribbean came out, Master and Commander came out too,
Oh,
and
yep.
the Aubrey Maturin novels had, I would say, as much an influence on the game itself than just kind of the whole like weird spooky pirates genre did too, if not more in many ways. So and you know, there are other games I think out there. Like I remember they had, well, I think it was actually a Master Commander game at one point they had in the office that they were like playing for inspiration. But so they had that, and uh, you know, they really kind of drew from sort of both sources at the beginning, but as they evolved more along and they had new ship designs, they, I think, had to kind of think up ways to get to get like to make to think up reasons might be a better way to say it. Think up reasons to kind of bring these various ship designs all into this one shared world where, you know, which sort of, if you look at like the actual history of piracy, more or less spans like, you know, 300 some years of, you know, well, I guess 200 years maybe. You know, if you go from like the 1600s to the Napoleonic era, then, you know, and so, but the question for the pirate CSG became, well, how do we kind of justify all this coming together in our little world, you know? And well, and then it's that point, it's like, well, we're going to add longships, we're going to add turtle ships, we're going to add, you know, the galleys. Like, how do we bring all this together? And you know, there was always the directive to kind of add new things with every expansion. It wasn't, you know, there were new factions, but definitely they tried to always add new designs because it kept things interesting. And so I think that, you know, the sort of move toward the historical to go back to, or excuse me, move from the historical to the fantastical to go back to your question was almost a function of that.
Yep.
Where, you know, they kind of had to find a way to bring all this stuff together. And they're like, well, if we bring it into this fantastic world, then it all fits. We don't have to try to explain it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Nice. All right, so now we get into some
Yeah,
of the
little inside baseball there.
Yeah, no, I love it. Yeah, that's really cool. So we get into the flavor text questions next. So what
Yeah.
sets did you design flavor text for? You said you started with Barbary Coast and then ended around one of the later sets. So you just
Yeah,
did most of them in
so I
between, I
can
guess.
Definitely Barbary Coast, South China Seas, Davy Jones' Curse. I did quite a bit for. I did not do Mysterious Islands.
Hmm.
Frozen North. I did. Um, Ocean's Edge. Yes. Yep. Definitely Ocean's Edge. I did a little bit of like some work on the Pirates of the Caribbean set, but considering it was all, you know, licensed material, it was like, I think, I don't even know if any of my stuff actually um, made it into the final set. I did some work on Rise of the Fiends, and definitely did some on Fire and Steel as well.
Yep. Nice.
I think Fire and Steel is the last set I did any work on.
Yep.
So
Did you know did you have like a favorite set in terms of like the theme of the set or anything like that?
I actually, yeah, I think that Davy Jones' Curse was probably my favorite.
Yep.
Just because it was really the first time they went full fantasy, you know, with the sea monsters and everything else, and
Yep.
like I could feel I could feel the world opening up, you know, the room expanding a little bit, and
Yeah.
like, oh yeah, I used to be working in a 15 by 15 foot space. Now it's like 100 by 100.
Yep.
So, you know, really tap into all this cool stuff.
Yeah, yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, I've come up with and myself and others in the community have come up with a bunch of cursed customs and stuff like that, and it is really fun to make flavor text for them because you don't have to just base it
Nice.
on like historical stuff or semi-historical stuff. You can go totally crazy in any direction you want, which
Yeah,
is a lot of fun. Yeah, I agree with that.
very cool.
Yep. Do you think it was a good idea from Wizkids to dive more into the fantasy concepts, or do you think they should have kept the game more historical? I guess we kind of answered that, but
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't know. It's a hard one because, you know, on one hand, you had to do new stuff with every expansion.
yep,
And if you just stayed historical, I think that, you know, it would have, I mean, you could argue that galleys were, you know, were still a historical, you know, at least in the Mediterranean,
yep,
right? We're still around and the 1600s, I guess. But but beyond that, there wasn't, until you get to like the true. I mean, even past the age of sail, I guess. And then you're looking at like ironclads and stuff.
Yeah.
And so, I think in order to kind of keep expanding, they kind of had to do it.
Yep.
And I mean, I I get it. Like, I understand why they did it. And I one of the things I always thought was interesting about the game was you could always leave that aspect out if you didn't want to play with it.
Yeah.
Like if you could make a gentleman's agreement with or a gentle person's agreement with your gaming group and say, yeah, we're not going to play with sea monsters or wacky submarines or any of that business. We're just going to play with the frigate sloop style ships, and that's what we're going to go with.
Yep. Yeah, Xerix and I have actually started a historical Caribbean game on the Vassal module, which is how you can play virtually. And we have a custom rule set that does ban like sea monsters and the cursed and submarines and stuff like that. So
Nice.
that's
Yeah.
exactly something I've done. Yep. Yeah, it is a cool
Very
ship.
cool. Yeah, and I feel like that's one of the with HeroClix, for you could always do stuff like you could just say, oh, we're only playing with the Avengers today, or things like that. But it was always kind of for one-off events. Whereas with a game like this, you can just straight up say like, nope, we're from here on out we're gonna remove the fantastical elements and only play with the historical, and the game still plays amazingly well.
Yeah. Yeah,
So.
exactly. Yep. Do you remember a favorite game piece you worked on?
Oh man, there's actually several,
Yeah, of
and
course.
yeah, they're not. I don't want to give too much away because I mean I don't know that it really matters, but so a lot of the names came from ship names were like either places I lived, visited, people I knew in some capacity.
Nice.
But I ran a it was a D&D 3.5 game as with sort of a weird pirates twist to it, and it used this supplement from Green Ronin called Skull and Bone. So this is like really early 2000s sort of role playing stuff. But I ran this role playing game for my group of friends, and we played pretty much every night, or excuse me, every week for about 2 or 3 years, and we went from level 1 to 20, and it was the longest campaign I've ever run. And quite a few of their ships and their characters made their way into the Pirate
Nice.
CSG. So yeah, those are my favorites, and even a couple of them ended up like I think reappearing a couple of times through no fault of or through nothing I had done. Like I think Mike Mulvihill had just picked the names up and carried them over from set to set. But yeah,
Nice.
so it was good like that, and it was really like little bits like that where I could do little winks and nods to things like that was super.
Yeah.
Even I love getting like historical stuff. Like I think I was last night. I think it's in Davy Jones' Curse actually. I put the Wida, which is a historical pirate ship, in one of the sets, which was a ship that was originally like a slave vessel that where the slaves had mutinied and gone to pirating after they had done so. So I threw it in the set, and like doing historical stuff like that that's really interesting. I thought was super cool, but I also like getting your like your friends carry D&D characters' names in there too. Also kind of cool.
Yeah. Very nice. So, did you design any game pieces directly at all, or was it all just like names and flavor text?
I'm sorry, ask again.
Uh, did you design any game pieces directly, or was it all just names and flavor text?
I did not. It was all just names and flavor.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. The audio is a
Yeah.
little funky sometimes, but it's okay.
Sorry about that. Yeah.
No, it's all good. No, it's not. It's not your problem at all. Um, did you have a favorite grand storyline or overarching flavor narrative? Possibly spanning multiple sets, kind of like what you alluded to earlier.
Yeah. Yeah. There were definitely there were the ones like featuring like I think like Calico Cat and the sort of like Jack Hawkins and stuff like those storylines, the ones that did like very overtly span multiple sets, like those were all actually done by Mike, I believe by Jordan, because Jordan, um, like Jack Hawkins was Jordan's character.
Yep.
And so he wanted, he kind of exercised his right to kind of come in and dictate what the storylines were going to be for those characters. That's totally. I mean, I think I threw a few in there myself that like ships that sort of changed hands over from set to set and things like that to just kind of like have some continuity along with some of the other pieces as well. And again, like I think there's just some Easter eggs in there that the savvy player will notice if they go and kind of read all the different flavor text.
Yep.
So
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I love that. Seeing the character development among the sets and things like that. And they brought some of them back for Return to Savage Shores, which was never released, but there's actually some flavor text from that set that originated in some of the sets that you designed flavor text for. So some other people that were writing the flavor text later on must have actually picked up some of what you designed, which is neat. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, there was continuity up until the very end. So yep.
Yeah, very cool. Yeah, they were always super big on that, and it was like we had a continuity editor, who at least Wizkids did. And I'm pretty sure she helped oversee what we worked on the Pirate CSG. So
Yep, nice. This is a weird one. Do you have any like least favorite flavor text or ideas that you had for the game that you either threw out or that were just funny or just kind of bizarre, or even if it wasn't something you had worked on that you saw or anything like that?
Yeah. So I had done when I was first kind of working on the or on the flavor text for the game, I wasn't really sure how to approach the like some of the French and Spanish names.
Yep.
And I will here's some more inside baseball. I will admit I used Google Translate a couple of times,
Yep.
and it just this was still pretty early days, and it just came up with some garbage. So never got used, but like there was just never rely on Google Translate to translate names of ships. That's my advice to any aspiring writers.
Okay.
So,
I've actually done that with a few customs, but oh well.
well, I was going to say they may have gotten better in the last 10, but
Yeah.
so certainly in like whatever 2005 or 2006, it was not great.
Yep. uh, well, the next one was, did you have a favorite set you worked on flavor text for, which was Davy Jones' Curse? I guess we could go the other way and ask you if you had a least favorite set that you worked on.
Least favorite set, yeah. Let me think about that for a second.
Yeah.
Because there were. I will admit that the long ships in the Frozen North kind of like puzzled me,
Yes.
and I've never been a huge fan of like Norse or kind of Viking mythology.
Mm-hmm.
I will I will come right out and say that Thor is probably my least favorite Avenger for that movie for that for that reason, and I've not actually seen a single Thor movie all the way through.
Yep.
So, although I hear Thor Ragnarok's supposed to be pretty good, so I'll probably get over my my irrational dislike and watch it anyway. But like, it's just something that isn't that interesting to me. And so I guess if I were going to say least favorite, that might be it. But
Yep.
it was still super fun to work on, and I mean, I got to throw like Beowulf references in there, so that was pretty cool, and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, some people have a little bit of an issue with the Frozen North set because the Vikings were so far out of the timeline that it made no sense to suddenly introduce longships from like the early like 1100s or whatever time period they were in into like the Age
Right.
of Sail game. That is one thing that other people have talked about as well, being kind of
Well,
a con of
and
the Frozen North set.
yeah, and there was a reason they did it, which I don't know, may not have ever actually been public. So like, bear with me if this is like, or if it is, like, just say, yeah, we know this. But I guess they had the whole notion behind it was there was some resurgence in like Norse, um, like, I don't know, national pride or whatever. And the Norwegians, or the Scandinavians, I guess, because it wasn't just Norwegians. The Scandinavians building longships again to go compete with the other world powers on the high seas. That was, I don't know that ever made it out into the public, like,
Huh,
arena
interesting.
of knowledge, but that was sort of the, like, that was the conceit behind it. So there, I guess, given that, like, I could see it, but I'm still kind of with you. It never made much sense.
Yeah,
It was really, I think it was a reason to get the design into the, out into the wild, and the new ship design, and just kind of, explore and go with that. So yeah.
yep. Huh. Yeah, I've never heard of that. But yeah, that's a new information
Okay.
for me at least. Yeah. There is a chance it's been talked
Yeah.
about on like the miniature trading forum a long time ago because there's so many little golden nuggets at the various pirates forums on the internet, but not something I've
Yeah.
known about. Oh,
I
that's
mean,
good.
honestly, the only reason I remember it is that's what they, like, when they kicked me off, they gave me a brief as to like what the background information on the set was.
Yep.
And that was the background brief on the set. And it was a less than a paragraph of like the Scandinavians, there's been a resurgence of Scandinavian nationalism. They've started building longships again to go compete, blah, blah, blah. And I mean, historical longships were tiny compared to,
Yeah.
like actual sailing ships. So yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's pretty
like I said,
bizarre.
yeah, it didn't quite work for me. So there you go.
Yeah, no, that's totally fair. It's a good segue into the next section, which is about the forums, which I find really interesting because I've spent a ton of time on the various Pirates forum. I got in the community like 2011, so I was too late to be on the actual
Mm,
Wizkids Pirates forum. But
yeah.
what was your favorite experience or aspect of the old Wizkids Pirates forums?
Oh man, I love talking to people just about the game, and seeing how excited people were about it. And that's true of, I was on the HeroClix forum the most. And that was a function of the fact that it was the most traffic forum was had, and there needed the most attention and moderation. But
Yep.
I spent a fair amount of time on, and just seeing how excited people were about it, and just getting involved in conversations about it, watching the people come up with strategies. Like, I loved that, and just because when you work at a game company, you're sort of, you don't necessarily always play the games you're making, or if you do, you're play testing it so much that you're just like, you kind of get tired of it, right?
Yep.
And I think I mentioned I was a HeroClix judge, before I joined the company. And once I joined, like, I stopped playing HeroClix, certainly competitively at stores, and at venues and stuff, because I I was burned out because it was something I did all day long at work. But to be able to kind of dip into the forums and see how, like, just enthusiastic people were was amazing, and it was good for the soul. I think it was really just pleasant to do, and a great deal of fun. And that was why we were there. At the end of the day, like, that's we were. They actually asked me that in my job interview. They said, what do you do if you get burned out and stuff? And I said, well, at the end of the day, we're making games for people to have fun. Like,
Yep.
how bad can that be?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Exactly.
it can't. And to be fair, in crunch time, it can be pretty bad. But it's also, it's great at the same time. Bring joy into people's lives. Like,
Yeah.
that's cool.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. Did you have any least favorite experiences on the forums?
I always hated having to be the moderator, actually, because I have, despite my online alias, I I'm terrible at playing the bad guy, and or or putting my foot down. Like, and there were a few things when people just not just cross the line, but like drive a garbage truck through the line.
Yeah.
and that then you kind of just have to do what you have to do.
Yep.
But oh, that's a good story. Okay, actually, I did remember something sort of related,
Nice.
but I'll get to that in a second. Yeah, I never really liked having to be the forum police. I always just was like, why can't everybody get along? Come on, y'all. So the funny story is I was actually out with a bunch of WizKids people. I can't remember where we were, but it was like 9 o'clock on a Friday night. We're all walking into wherever we were going, and I get a phone call from the guy who was in charge of the website and the forums. And he said, "I need you to stop whatever you're doing and get to a computer." And I was like, "Oh my god!" So like my Friday night out with my buddies like turned into me like I turning around, and I think about driving like an hour home to go like deal with this website hack. So yeah,
Oh, it
good
was a
time.
hack?
Yeah, I
Oh,
got
okay.
the site, and it was either both got hacked, I think. But
Okay.
yeah,
Huh. Interesting. So yeah, you had to deal with some of the unsavory users on the forums and ban people, stuff like
yeah,
that. Yeah.
yeah. It's I know it's part of the job. It's not one I particularly like or enjoy. So
Yeah, of course. Yep. Yeah, that makes sense. Uh oh, this was one I find interesting. Was there anything that started on the forum that made it into the game of Pirate CSG?
right, I saw that question on the. So not to my knowledge,
Yep.
and they WizKids had a sort of spoken slash unspoken policy of not accepting or looking at fan like stats or you know solicited materials from fans. And the reason I always was told, and I've had people say that this is not correct, so bear with me. But the reason I was always told was we didn't want to open ourselves up to any sort of lawsuit should we use something that a community member had made, like a stats for a ship, for example. Like if a community member had statted up a ship, and then we were like, oh yeah, we'll use that. Then the community, that person could then say, well, I want a share of the profits of this set.
Yeah.
And so we, yeah, I mean, and that seems ridiculous just thinking about it and saying it out loud, but I suppose it can happen. And
Yeah.
I, having worked with the legal department I work with now, there was far more strict. Um, they just shut down and don't want to do anything like that. So I mean, I get it, but like I always thought, they should, like a fan design set or even just a place where people could, you know, that was, because I know it existed on HC Realms. I know it existed on the Realmworks sites where people could go and post their own characters and stuff. I wish we made that slightly more official, even if it was just a wink and a nod sort of thing. I think people, because people, again, it goes back to the enthusiasm, right? If they're enthusiastic for your game, encourage that. Like
Yep.
that's what they're there for. Anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I love that. And now there's no lack of it nowadays because there's custom ships thread on both forums and there's been a lot of custom creators over the past, 10 years since the game has gone out of print. A lot of people have made
Right.
a ton of customs, including myself and a bunch of the other community members I've played against. So, yeah, we've gone pretty crazy actually making hundreds or thousands of custom ships and crew. So, there's no shortage of
I
that.
think that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, there's
Like
a ton of
I love.
ideas out there.
Yeah, I
Uh,
love that happens. I think it's fantastic. I love that it's game went out of print. Like that really says something, I think, about just the longevity of the game we made. That's amazing.
yep. Did
You
you
guys
refer?
awesome.
Yeah. Did you refer any Pirate CSG community ideas from the forum to any of the game designers?
No, for the reasons previously stated.
Yep, absolutely.
So
Yep. Yeah, that
yeah.
makes sense. Were there any forum users that were particularly helpful or notable that you want to give a shout out to or anything?
I don't yeah, I don't remember it. I mean all the folks I can remember, I think were HeroClix players, not
Yep.
necessarily Pirates players.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So I hate to, yeah, I hate to say that to the Pirates community,
No, that's
but
fine. No.
yeah.
And I mean, it's been,
Yeah,
13 years since you were working at WizKids, so that's totally fine.
uh,
All right, so then some of the closing questions. Some of these are kind of random. Do you have a favorite ship type, like a five-master, or probably not a three-masted longship, obviously?
no, I really love it's the treasure ships, right? That were the giant uh like the convention giveaways. They were called treasure ships, right?
Yeah,
Uh,
the 10 masters. Yep.
yeah, I always thought those were really cool. I love just a big five-masted ship that could, broadside somebody out of the water.
Yep.
That was, I thought, yeah, but I played a lot of Sid Meier's Pirates on the computer way back in the day, and even more recently, I think there was a console version at one point. But so the small and fast ships in that game were always better than the big ships. So which was actually something I wasn't sure they ever quite captured 100% in the CSG, but maybe I just wasn't playing them right. I don't know.
Yeah, sometimes it's kind of sometimes it's like a cost thing and then also like a role thing. So the bigger ships will always be better in combat than the smaller ships are usually better at getting gold, which is what wins the game. But
Right.
they did make the one masters, sometimes some of the smaller ships, they made them kind of expensive relative to the four and five masters. Like you can get a really good five master for 15 points, and some of the one masters cost like 7, 8, 9 points. So you're not going to really
Mm-hmm.
use one of those when you can get a bigger and better ship for, not five times the cost.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that's pretty much how I remember it being too. It was like, because I mean, and granted, you could always do if they were cheaper. You might be able to do like a swarm approach, but
oh yeah.
I always like the idea of certainly like I said in Sid Meier's Pirates of the small, uh, like the sloop or this a sloop of war or whatever taking on just a giant frigate by basically swimming or sailing circles around it, which
Yeah.
was always good fun. So yeah.
Yep. Nice. What were some of your ideas that never made it into the game?
That's a great question. I so there were certainly a few reference friends that never made it in there, and I think like there were a couple of through storylines. Trying to remember that I think like I got the first part in, but then the subsequent parts kept getting changed on me when I would
Oh.
turn the text in, so I just kind of gave up after a while.
Oh wow.
So yeah, and and that happens. Like you know, like I think I said earlier, like if you've done freelancing, that can happen. Like they will sometimes just change stuff on you
Yep.
rather than asking for a rewrite. So it's not that big of a deal, but it was like still, it's like, well, all right, I'll guess I'll just quit trying with this one if they keep changing it out on me.
Yeah.
So
uh, do you still own any pirate stuff at all or no?
I do. I actually have a almost complete set of the game. It is
Nice.
in my storage unit, but I do have it, and I I think I was trying to figure out where uh, my set stop, and I think I may have up through Savage Shore. But I am missing a bunch of like promo cards and stuff. A lot of the promo cards after I left Wizkids, I don't have anymore,
Yeah.
or rather, I don't have because I never got. They
Yeah.
weren't part of the like. So again, insider baseball, Wizkids employees factory set just straight up, and they would send me a factory set of the Pirates
Oh, okay.
stuff that I worked on. So I kept, I stayed in the Pirates even after I wasn't getting the Hero Clip. But and the factory sets were one of everything, except they were off. They would sometimes be missing like promo stuff we did with like Scry magazine or
Yep.
sometimes convention promos and that sort of thing. So
Yeah.
because they were just kind of one offs that weren't technically part of any set.
Okay.
So there's a fair few of those I'm missing, and I actually dug up a giant list I had in my email from like, because I was trying to chase some of them down from some other WizKids employees who were still there, and there's just some stuff nobody has, like, so apparently.
Oh, really
So
interesting. Huh.
yeah, there were some islands that were in a Swedish magazine or whatever. I
Oh,
may be
yeah.
getting it wrong,
Yeah, the
but like,
Scandinavian home islands. Yep.
yeah, there you go. And apparently, like, nobody has those. So
Yeah,
at least none of the Wiz.
there's only a handful of people in the world, I think, with those.
Oh, geez, yeah. No, none of the WizKids people did. That's for sure.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, there's this super collector in Germany. His screen name is Old Man, and he has like basically everything. So, and
Nice.
he actually has two ships in a bottle promos that are like one of ones, so they're the only ones in the world. Um,
Oh yeah.
and-
Did we do those? We may have done those as trophies at one point.
oh, really?
I
Huh.
want to say we did ships and bottles as like trophy Gen Con or something like that.
Huh.
Man, that's
Interesting.
cool. So,
Yeah, interesting.
yeah.
It reminds me of the busts from Spanish Main, the first set. That is interesting.
Yeah, yeah. And in fact, I'm pretty sure I have a set of them too.
Yep, nice. Yeah,
Yeah,
old man, he's got two of the ships in a bottle, and then there's supposedly there might be two more out there, but nobody has turned up with them, so maybe they just don't
gotcha.
exist. So we've kind of theorized that there might be someone out there that has them and doesn't know they're rare, or they're just like they could be sitting in like a
Yeah.
box somewhere that nobody knows about. It's pretty funny.
Well, I will say there, my I stay in touch with quite a few of my former WizKids colleagues, and we all have either storage units or garages just full of stuff that like we're kind of scared to go through.
Wow,
So
interesting.
I got, yeah, and I actually ditched most of my hero clicks um, because we ended up my wife and I moved overseas for a couple of years, and so we were really trying to downsize everything as much as we could, and I ended up like selling most of my sets of HeroClix around that time. But I kept the Pirates because it's much smaller and more compact. And, you know, I regret nothing. I am glad I have them.
Yep.
Someday I'm going to teach my kids how to play it. It's going to be super fun.
Awesome. Yeah, that sounds awesome. Yay. There's one specific ship called the Obago Deuce that was from Fire and Steel that apparently there's only around 30 copies in existence that have been like verified. So that one is like
Uh huh.
the rarest ship in the game. And apparently
Wow.
there's a group in Portland, Oregon that got a hold of around 13 of them or something like that. So
Oh,
if
geez.
you have that
Huh.
one, it actually sold on eBay in January for $500. So
Whoa.
yeah, so
Wow.
yeah, it's pretty crazy. And there were some of them were sold back in like 2008, 2009. Most of them went for I don't know between like 50 and 200. I remember one went for like 232 on eBay, and that was a big deal. So you never see them anymore. Like the chances of getting an Obago Deuce from a collector nowadays is like you basically have to wait like 3 or 4 or 5 years until someone with like a mega collection that has like pretty much everything comes out with it, and then you have to be ready to
Right.
pay up basically. So it's pretty
Yeah,
crazy.
yeah, yeah. Wow. Okay, cool. That's cool. That's awesome.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
there's actually somebody I know who might have one.
Okay.
She's the she was the brand manager for a while
Who? What?
for Pirates
She
towards
was the
the
what?
end.
Sorry.
She was sorry, that's all right. She was the brand manager for Pirates
Okay.
towards the end,
Yep.
and I know she's got a pretty near complete collection of everything. So,
Yep. Yeah, I'm trying to get. I might this summer. I'm planning to reach out to Kelly Bonilla and Tiffany O'Brien potentially to see if they might be interested in the podcast too. So.
oh yeah, Tiffany's the person I'm thinking of. So,
Yep. Okay.
yeah.
Nice. Yep.
Yeah. She's not well, and actually, I was going to say I can Mike too if you so.
Oh, sorry. What was that? Sorry, it's breaking up a
I
little bit.
can. That's all right. Sorry, I could put you in touch with Mike Mulvihill.
Okay. Awesome. Yeah. Actually, I reached out to him on Facebook. Um. So yeah. Nice.
Oh,
Yeah. I
yeah.
think it's.
He doesn't always Facebook all the time. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, that's cool. Yeah, I know he's very busy. He works for Ravensburger these days.
Yep.
He travels a lot. So I will, but I can just ping him real quick and if he's around and or answering his message.
Yep.
So
Cool. Hey, thanks a ton for that. That's awesome.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, I think it's amazing. The Obago Juice sold for $500, basically 11 years after the game went out of print. So it shows that people are still
Mhm.
willing to pony up their dollars for some rare ships.
Yeah, that's
So
amazing. I love it. That is
yeah,
so cool.
yeah. Uh, you already talked about some of them, but what are some of your other favorite memories of Pirate CSG in general? Could be flavor text or playing or anything really.
Yeah, doing convention work, demos at conventions. It was always exhausting, but it was so much fun. Like, especially when you got kids coming up to, who would come up to the table with their parents, and like you could show them how to play the game, and you could see them get it, and they're like, "Dad, this is amazing."
Yeah.
I love that. Like, it was so much fun. We had, I think it was Gale Force 9 made us these amazing terrain tables,
Yes.
and yeah, they were so cool to play on. I actually won those.
What
Who
was
ended
that?
up with those? I said I wonder what happened to those when the lights
Uh,
went on.
yeah.
So because I'm sure they ended up in somebody's garage somewhere, but
Yeah.
they were just so much fun to play on and demos on and stuff. Like I loved doing that. It was such a great time.
Yep. Yeah, I've actually seen pictures of those GF9 tables. One of them was based on the At Ocean's Edge set 'cause it had like a waterfall, and then there was like a
Mm.
whirlpool. I don't know if you saw that one. I think it had a volcano too. I think.
Oh, that sounds awesome. No, I the one I remember was just plain like islands and ocean stuff.
Okay, cool. Yeah, there's some pictures at Board Game Geek. That might be
Okay.
on there. I'm not sure. There's a ton of great like old gems at the in the pictures and in the files section at Board Game Geek for the Pirates game. So. Um,
Nice.
Oh yeah, and then I was gonna say, some people talk about in the community nowadays. Some people are still trying to play at conventions once in a while. Like you'll see somebody going to Con of the North or Gen Con stuff like that, and they'll ask the community members if anybody's going in case they want to play. So somebody actually did an
Hmm.
event. It might have been 2017. I can't remember, but somebody actually ran an event that they said went really well for Pirates not too long ago. So
That's
it's pretty awesome.
that's awesome.
Yep.
Cool.
Uh,
Yeah, I used to go to Gen Con every year before I had two young kids, and I just remember being amazed at the number of like you could play the SimCity collectible card game if you wanted to, like
yep.
just amazing old games that probably appeal to like you know a handful of people in the world, but man, people were still playing them, and that was so cool to see.
Yep. Yeah, I love that. How did you get out of Pirates? Like, did you just left with
Well,
kids or whatever?
yeah, I mean, so I I think I just kind of didn't like Wizkids just didn't reach out for me, to me, to do the flavor text for the last few sets, and I I don't care to speculate as to why, um, and so that was kind of really the end of my with the game professionally anyway. I you know I think the last time I played was shortly before I moved overseas, and the last set I wrote for was shortly after I moved overseas. So I was writing after I played. Well, I think when WizKids kind of the first time around, or well, I guess when it folded, it just it kind of got shelved along with all the other and for whatever reason no one's kind of come back to bring it back, and which is really a shame because I think it could do really well,
Yep.
even if all you did was reprint old cards, you could still make a lot of money, I think, doing it and appeal to a new generation of gamer who would be very interested in something that's both fun and portable and has that sort of maker feel to it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. And that's one thing that people have talked about the past few years is like the nostalgia factor. 'Cause a lot of people that got into it last decade are older now, and now they have more money. So then they have more money to spend on the game. So they have actually
Yeah.
spent, sometimes a lot of people, including myself, have spent more money on the game this past decade of the 2010s than the previous decade. And then some of those people
Right.
have had kids since then too. So now it is a really interesting idea
Yeah.
in terms of demographics and who to attract back to the game.
I think it would be amazing. It would be a great, amazing thing to bring them back. For exactly the reason that, like, we have more disposable income. There's the nostalgia factor going on. A lot of us kids, yeah, that would just be. I think it's certainly this. The stars are aligned. Someone
Yep.
just needs to go and do it.
Yeah, I've looked into it, and it's just a legal cesspool of sorts because like there's all these
Oh God,
patents.
yeah.
Yeah, WizKids still has the patents, and then there's the issue with the Wizards of the Coast patent as well. So I've looked into it, and it's possible that some of the patents might expire in like 2022 or 2023, but I don't know if they'll be able
Mm-hmm.
to renew them again from there or not. So it's kind of just
Sure.
legal issues mostly at this point. So
Yeah, that I wish I could say I was surprised, but I'm not.
yeah, yep, absolutely. If the game came back, do you think it would have a better chance as a physical or a digital game?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I want. I think you could do both. Way like, and I don't know, like I really see the strengths of doing a digital game. Like because so much. You know, let me take a step back.
Hmm.
The nostalgia factor in me says there should be a physical element to the game.
Yep,
However, the practical, like what, how the marketplace is right now, part of me says, well, chances are it would do better, as a digital game right now.
yep,
So yeah, even if it was just a mobile game, or like an iPad game, it would probably do super well.
yep,
Even I would say without necessarily the collectible element to it too.
yep,
Although you could certainly, I guess, monetize it that way if you were thinking of doing it like that. But if you just had like a certain set number of ships and you could build your fleet from there, like that would be amazing.
yep. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I enjoy playing on the Vassal module. It's 2D, it's not like a 3D game, but the
Mm-hmm.
Vassal module you can play online with anyone in the world that has a like a data connection, and it's pretty cool. Did you ever play the Sony Online Entertainment version? That one actually ended in
No, I
'99.
remember hearing about it, but
Yep. Yeah, you never played it at all.
no, uh-uh.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't either. I didn't really know about any of the online stuff until like 2010, 2011, but oh well. That's one of my
Yeah.
regrets sort of, but oh well. If Pirate CSG came back, would you want to return to it? Like in terms of
Oh,
playing
I'd
or in
love to.
terms of yeah, in terms of the flavor text stuff like that.
I would love to. That would be awesome.
Yeah, awesome. I love hearing it.
Yeah.
Nice. What are you doing now?
So I think I mentioned I'm the senior brand box. So that's my kind of day job, I guess. I still do a fair bit of freelance writing, kind of role playing games and stuff. Um, I most recently had some work published in the Expanse role playing game. And let's see, there's some stuff coming up. I wrote quite a bit for the new version of Eclipse Phase that's going to come out soon. And I'm trying to think of what else I've done kind of recently. Um, stuff I can't stuff I can't talk about. Don't.
Yeah, that's
Um,
fine.
yeah,
It's all
yeah,
right.
and and I just even like I finished the novel. Haven't published it yet. I'm still convinced I can get an agent for it as opposed to kind of publishing on the Kindle store, but it's looking more and more like I should just publish it on the Kindle store
Yeah.
because I'm about halfway through my second novel right now, and I kind of like to get the first one out there before the second one's done.
Yep.
So yeah, and having two having two young kids takes up a lot of my time, and kind of game wise, let's see, I play about every 4 months in a Call of Cthulhu campaign, and I've really gotten down the rabbit hole of a game called Gaslands. So I don't know if you know what this is, but it's basically the car chase scenes from Mad Max played with modified Hot Wheels.
Nice.
So it's good fun, and 95% of what I do is just modifying the Hot Wheels.
Yeah.
I've played the game, a little bit, but like most miniatures games, you spend a lot of time painting the miniatures.
Yeah.
But
Nice.
it's super fun, and it kind of encourages wackiness, and so I've really gotten into.
Yeah, that does sound pretty sweet, actually. Nice.
Yeah,
Where can people find you online?
I'm fairly well. I was going to say I'm fairly not online much. I have a portfolio, but it's a professional portfolio at my old website, which is jasonmical.com. And like, I don't think I've touched my Twitter account in a year. But if anyone wants to go look, it's Twitter, or I'm just at Brother Magneto on Twitter. So yeah, like I said, I don't think I've even looked at it in a year.
Yep.
So I've kind of gone through one of the like getting away from social media phases. I still
Yeah.
get on Facebook mostly because we've got there's a like a couple of just groups I'm part of that I go and check messages for posts and messages for every now and then. One of which is the Gaslands group. So if you're interested in Gaslands, I do post my cars there from time to time, so you can
Nice.
see what I've been working on. But
Nice.
apart from that, like I don't really have much of an online anymore.
Yeah, that's
So
fine. No,
yeah,
I don't really blame you for that. That's totally totally legitimate. Anything you want to
yeah.
like shout
Thanks.
out or give like a game a thumbs up or anything, any projects you want to advertise, things like that.
Oh man. Well, I will say, yeah, if you're into kind of futuristic sci-fi at all with a lot of science behind it, the Expanse role playing game is a good deal of fun. So I wrote the chapter on orbital mechanics for it, which largely came about because I played a lot of Kerbal Space Program and learned a lot a lot about orbital mechanics. I will say, despite having been not the best math student in high school. Let's just leave. We can say that. So once you put it in a game, though, man, I understand that. If only they had Kerbal Space Program when I was in school.
Yep, nice. Uh, all right, so then the last part is questions of the day. You can ask any question you want to the Pirate CSG audience, and if you have any, you can go ahead. I'll ask mine first, just in case you want to brainstorm one for a second. My question would be, what's your favorite flavor text for any game piece in existence, and especially from sets that Jason designed? So Barbary Coast through Fire and Steel, with the exception of Mysterious Islands. And one thing I just want to talk about, I assume you made Loki's Revenge, the flavor text for that one. That's actually my favorite.
Uh,
It says, the Loki's Revenge spews fire like some kind of deranged god, an ability that science has yet to explain.
yeah,
That's my favorite one.
that very much sounds like something I would do.
Nice.
So,
That's my favorite
yeah,
flavor text.
cool. Let's see. So okay. So do you want me to ask a question, community?
Yeah, to the
To,
Pirates community that people can answer if you want. Yeah.
okay, cool. Um,
It's optional. It's fine either way.
yeah. So I'd actually say this: if you were to name a ship, if you were to name a pirate ship, what would you name it and why?
Okay, awesome. I like it. Very nice. All right.
Yeah, it's always great to hear what I think people would tap their own imaginations to do. So
Yep. Yeah. And yeah, that'll be a good question for all the customs creators in the audience like myself and Xerix and some of the other community members. Thanks for coming on. This was a great podcast. Thanks for
cool.
listening, and we'll see you again soon for more Pirates content.